Great. Well, welcome everybody to the GreenSpot Conversations webinar series. My name is Dave Celebrezzi. I'm the GreenSpot coordinator for the City of Columbus. I'm out of Sustainable Columbus office, which is in public utilities. Today, we're going to talk about starting and maintaining a recycling program at work. And with the pandemic, maybe you're coming back into the office. So how do you kind of restart your recycling program? But before we get to that, I do want to mention that our GreenSpot Conversations were created by our GreenSpot Advisory Board. And the conversations are really to touch on various sustainability topics in our community, kind of give you a high level view of an issue, and then give you more information where you can kind of search it out and find more information on your own. If you have any questions, whether if you're a participant or if you're watching via Facebook, you can either type it in the comment section or the chat feature, and we'll get to them here at the end. But I am really excited about today's topic, but I'm getting ahead of myself already. So when we think about sustainability here at the city, we think of three things. We think about environment, we think about equity, and we think about the economy. When you have those three things all moving in the same direction, that's when you have sustainability, and that's really when we thrive as a community, and that's what we aim for. So if you're not familiar with GreenSpot, it's a program that encourages folks to go green at home. We inspire, educate, and recognize households, businesses, community groups, and now neighborhoods that adopt sustainable practices. We give them 40 to 50 ideas of how they can operate a little bit more green or how you can live a little bit more sustainably. So check us out online, columbusgreenspot.org. I won't read the numbers. You can kind of see what they are there on the screen. These are some of our numbers in our GreenSpot universe of the savings that we've seen as a GreenSpot community. These are, I like to say these are probably underreported because really, like with our GreenSpot members, they have an electronic dashboard where they can track some of their successes and their commitments, and they can change up their commitments for our members. In fact, they get a heads up of when these webinar series are going to happen before the general public. So it's good to be a member. All right, so with today, we're going to talk, like I said before, talk about recycling at work, and how do you restart your program, or how do you create a program at your place of work. So we do have an expert on hand, which is awesome. We have Sheila Davis. She's the business programs administrator with SWACO on recycling at your place of work. She joined the innovations and programs team at SWACO in July of this year. While she is new to Columbus, relocating from Northeast Ohio, she's not new to the solid waste and recycling industry, having previously worked in setting up commercial waste and recycling services for businesses as a commercial sales rep for Kimball Companies. Sheila and SWACO are working towards a diversion rate of 75% by 2032 by focusing on improving the recycling efforts of the business community. Sheila has two daughters. One lives in the Netherlands and one is an emergency room nurse at Grant Medical Center. She's also a parent to three rescue dogs, Ginger, Bean, and Murphy, who we might hear from them a little bit later. And in her spare time, she crafts paper floral arrangements from upcycled parts and sells them at local flea and vendor markets on the weekend. So welcome, Sheila. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sheila. Sheila, just let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yes, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So we always start our presentations at SWACO with just a little bit of history about SWACO, just in case anyone on the call today doesn't know. But SWACO started when the law passed in 1989, I believe, or 88, that created the solid waste districts in Ohio. Franklin County is its own district, and SWACO operates the landfill there. Next slide. And that's just at a glance what the different districts look like, so you're familiar. As David mentioned, the goal is to increase diversion by 25% over the next 10 years. So we would like to be at 75%. And currently it was at 50%, but we've actually increased 1%. So now we're at 51% that's being diverted from the landfill. So we're doing very well compared to the national average. So reaching that goal of 75% diversion is really not too far out of reach. Next slide. In 2018, Franklin County and South SWACO did an analysis of what exactly is coming into the landfill. So 25% of the recyclable material, that's that blue section in the slide, that is, the focus is for me as far as helping to divert that material. The largest thing coming into the landfill is the food waste at 15%, cardboard's at 10%. That's the, the second highest, but a lot of that material is actually coming from businesses. Next slide. So the commercial waste breakdown of that percentage in this little graph here, 60% of the recoverable, recyclable material is from commercial sectors, whereas 40% is from residential. And I apologize, that graph is kind of hard to read, but it's just a kind of similar to what the last image was, showing you what the breakdown is. Next slide. So people often ask, what's the impact is in our communities for recycling. And when the study was conducted, we discovered, these numbers really do make a difference. There are over 372 businesses in the recycling industry in Central Ohio. It affects the payroll and the annual revenue as well. For every one job in the landfill, there are 10 jobs in the recycling industry. Next slide. So one thing that I want to talk about today is returning to work and your recycling, because a lot of businesses do have recycling plans, and a lot of us have been working remote, and we haven't really been in the office, or it's been a hybrid kind of situation where some people are in and some people are not. So there's three things I want to talk about today, and that's really reevaluating your containers and what your needs are, re-educating your staff, and then reintroducing the recycling program to your key partners. Next slide. So when we're reevaluating our recycling plan, you're really looking at container placement and signage, and maybe the population is less, in their working pods, and so you don't need as many containers. So you just have to kind of assess room by room where you currently have containers placed, and really determine if you still need them there, or maybe you need more there. The other thing to tailor each workspace to what kind of waste is generated in that space. Lunchroom or break room is going to be different than what's maybe a copier room. And I always tell people, if you're having problems with contamination and people putting things in the wrong container, or usually it's the problem is that you need better signage, and we also need to make sure that there's a receptacle, as we call it, twinning the bin. So there's one for recycling and one for trash, right? They're side by side, so that there's a choice. If you also are a business that's doing composting, then you'd have 3 in a row. Next slide. And the reeducation is also the second thing I wanted to talk about, because what is recycled at work is not always the same thing that is being recycled in your curbside program. That's because commercial recycling is different than residential recycling. It's based on the hauler that you have. So if you know who the hauler is, you can evaluate what materials that they're taking. For example, Republic does not collect glass, but Rumpke does. So you just have to know who your commercial hauler is, and then you can figure out which program that they offer that you can then educate your employees on what can go in the container. We also believe that you should reward good behavior, like you've been caught red-handed or caught blue-handed for recycling, and provide some positive messaging when you see people maybe taking copier paper out of the trash and putting it in the recycling bin. Staying positive, that's the norm. Just everyone is recycling, and if you keep pointing out that that's what we're doing, then more people will be on board with that mindset. And also remind people not to forget about your new hires. If your recycling program has been up for a while, you have new people coming in, it's a good idea to sit down and talk with them and explain what goes where and what you're recycling. Next slide. And then to reintroduce it is really about your custodial staff, whether you have inside the office person that's doing that, an employee, or if you're contracting that out. It's really important to have a conversation with those who are handling the maintenance of your facility, because we often hear that the program breaks down because someone who isn't aware that your company's recycling is collecting recycling and trash and it's all going in the trash, for example. So you really have to take time to have a conversation with those and reintroduce that, hey, our recycling program is starting back up. This is where the materials are going. And, you know, their focus has been on cleaning and COVID protocols. So maybe recycling has kind of fallen down the wayside. So you just have to reintroduce the topic that you are recycling and where things go. The picture on the right was Levesque Tower there. Just I thought it was cool to include because of the blue and green. This has been National America Recycles Day was on the 15th, and it's been kind of celebrated all week. So that's why that's on there, in case you were wondering. Next slide. Okay, so some of the tools, this is kind of a snapshot of the 7 steps that are on the SWACO website. Under the diversion tab, there's a whole business section for recycling. And we have 7 different things that are kind of walk you through setting up a program. So if you don't have a recycling program, you know, it's a good way to use it. Or if you do have a program, I always say, you know, how well am I doing that? Or what information do I need to add or to beef up what the program I currently have? Next slide. So this is the same information, just a little bit easier to read. The 7 steps in a successful business recycling program. You know, the developing a recycling plan, we have a downloadable template there that allows you to capture the data, you know, the information as far as who your hauler is, who your custodial staff is, maybe who the point of contact person is in your building, or if you have multiple buildings on your property. And to really write goals for the program. And goals can be as simple as, you know, we need to do better at capturing bottles and cans. You know, maybe you're doing really well at cardboard and paper and not so well at the bottles and cans, or vice versa. So there just need to be real basics, some basic goals to help you get going. And in understanding your waste, we have an audit tool on the website that allows you to do what's called a visual audit, because an audit can be messy and you don't really want to get dirty at work, but you can visually, you know, take a note every day for a certain period of time, what is being placed in the receptacles, and kind of understand what the waste stream is. You know, if you have a lot of people with, you know, I would call it candy wrappers or granola bar wrappers, you know, those are recyclable through a different kind of program that would be like a mail in program. It's nothing that would be in your container that your local hauler would take, but there are other programs that exist for different things that are hard to recycle things. So just getting that audit will tell you kind of what you're generating. And then, you know, we always recommend that you work with your waste hauler. And like I said before, they have different materials that they're collecting. They can offer some help on education as what they accept, so that you provide good material for them and it's not contaminated. And the container placement and signage, again, very important. You can have containers at your desk. You could have containers in communal areas. It's kind of what your culture is for your company. So I know a lot of companies that have no containers at their desks. They want their people to get up and move as you're maybe going to get a beverage or you're using the restroom. They're taking their materials to those drop-off points. And as I mentioned before, education, you know, there's 2 times a year that we strongly suggest that you talk about recycling. Obviously, America Recycles Day is one, and April 22nd is Earth Day. Those are 2 easy in the calendar points of contact that you can promote your sustainability program. And then, you know, to ensure that you have a sustainable program, some people think that it's just once and done, but it's not. You have to constantly be reviewing your goals, reviewing what's, you know, the participation, making sure that you're giving, you know, the stakeholders at your company feedback, like, hey, we've been able to reduce the number of trash pickups because we've increased the number of recycling pickups. I mean, the general rule of thumb is 50% of what is in your trash is recyclable. So if you had an 8-yard dumpster once a week service, you probably could go 8-yard every other week, because if you put a recycling there, it would be taking the 50% that would be diverted. And then we always are, we're very, you know, positive about telling your story, whether that's internally or you're sharing it with your customer base, because there are customers who want to purchase and do business with with sustainable companies. So it's a positive thing that you can, express what you're doing and how you're doing it. Even if it's, not 100%, you're not doing everything, you're doing something, and that should be reported. Next slide. So one thing that SWACO is starting is to provide more educational resources for business. So you probably are familiar. We have the Recycle Right at Home series that Amy Densborn does. It's a webinar you can join. It talks about recycling at home. And we're starting the Recycle Right at Work series. And this is a half an hour conversation, like a lunch and learn type of setting. It's all virtual. And the first one is December 1st. We'll be discussing organizing a green team. And someone asked me, why are we having that as our first topic? Well, recently I had a business reach out and the person wanted to start recycling, and they were one person in a 100-employee business. And it's like, that's a lot of work to do for one person. You really need to have a group of people that are willing to work together, figure things out, and, write the goals out, determine where the containers are going to go, make the phone calls to the trash hauler to find out what the options are. So we really think that starting with a green team would be the best use of your time initially, and then you get into the toolkit. So that's why our topic will be organizing a green team. And I believe that is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you, Sheila. So folks, if you have any questions, if you want to, you can type them in the chat if you're on the WebEx, or you could write them in the, or do a comment on Facebook. I have you'll see me looking off to the bottom left here because that's where my phone is monitoring the chat. You had mentioned on National or America Recycles Day. And do you remember the date of that? I know it was fairly recently, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Monday the 15th this week.
So November. So one thing you could do is put that on your calendar for next year, right? And then of course, Earth Day is April 22nd. We like to say Earth Month, right? It's a whole month-long activities that you can do here in Columbus and Central Ohio and at your place of work. You had mentioned signs and how important signage is. Just a couple, I guess, clarifying questions. With signs, is it better to have the images on there, or is it better to have the words?
Well, I think the pictures are actually better. The pictures just allow you to match up what you're trying to throw away, and generally you have a better, cleaner collection when it's pictures versus words.
And do you all have like templates at the SWACO website or the Recycle Right?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. We do. We have some great templates, and then it will match up with what your hauler is. So, if you have Rumpke, for example, then you can put number 5 tubs in, which would be a yogurt container. Maybe you have it lunchtime at work. But if you had Republic, you wouldn't be able to put number 5 tubs in. You would, you could take that home, and maybe your curbside service is picked up by Rumpke. So, the signage has to match up with your hauler, but we do offer that.
Right. And then you had mentioned a couple of times, like with new hires, and like that struck me as that really is an opportunity to build that culture of sustainability at your place of work. Whether you're looking to start a recycling program, and I guess if you are looking to start a recycling program, you had mentioned look at your current waste hauler. Should you look to can you tell us a little bit more about that, like in terms of do I want to look at the contract that we have right now with the waste hauler to see what it says, things like that?
Yeah, I mean most haulers here in Franklin County offer recycling of some sort, whether that's cardboard only or the full commingle. So always start with who you currently have as a hauler and invite them to have a conversation with you about establishing recycling, what that would look like. Recycling isn't free. There's a cost to that. So, we shouldn't be surprised that we have to pay for it to be processed because there's, someone driving the truck and picking it up. And, but the advantages would be that you'll be generating less trash. So it should even out eventually on the costs on that. But I always say, yes, talk to the hauler first. You're definitely going to want a copy of your contract to see, when your contract renews, because if you want to recycle certain items and that particular hauler doesn't offer that, then, you're going to want to know when you have that window of opportunity to make a change if you wanted to. So those are all important things.
Yeah, so kind of shop around and look to see what's being offered. Make sure that your current contract doesn't have anything that precludes you from doing that.
Yeah.
Excellent points. Excellent points. So I guess with recycling too, a question that comes up is, if you have a recycling program and things kind of blend into the wall after a while, right? And so what are some ideas, and this is probably in your toolkit, but what are some ideas you have to keep employees engaged and up to date on the recycling? Like, is it, e-newsletters that, put something in there, or are there other ideas?
Yeah, there's lots of wonderful ideas on that. Well, I think people people are at different decision-making points when it comes to recycling. You might have people that are all on board and are really glad that you're recycling. You might have people that you work with that are like, why bother attitude maybe, or really haven't engaged, don't really care. So there's different points in the decision-making process, whether they're going to be compliant and recycle. So your messaging really has to talk to people along that entire spectrum, from your champions who are really excited to, influencers who are going to encourage people, to maybe your naysayers. Like, you just have to have messaging that talks to all of them. And I think that it's important to, if you do have a green team or you have a sustainability team, create some challenges, kind of like similar to you might do for your health insurance, where it says, sign up for the 5K and then you get so many points or you get rewarded. You can create sustainability kind of tracks that people do, and they can be anything from, like, I stopped using plastic bags and now I use tote bags for shopping, or I stopped bringing paper napkins in my lunch and I got myself a cloth napkin that I'm using because it's a reusable thing. Because we have to remember, it's not just about recycling, we're talking about reusing and reducing as well. So there's steps you can do to generate less waste to begin with. Instead of the single-use water bottle, maybe you're drinking from the reusable, refillable type of water container, or a cup that would be reused again and again. And maybe your office lunch gatherings or parties that you're having have used paper products in the past. So now you start buying the cups and the plates and the silverware that allows it to be washed over and over again. So I know we were talking about messaging and education, but when people see that the corporate body or entity is making these efforts to be sustainable, then it kind of steers them to think about, well, what could I do to be, you kind of, feel the pressure, especially if you show up in a meeting and you're the only one there with the water bottle that's a reusable single plastic, and everyone else has a mug of something that they can just keep refilling. Yeah, exactly. I noticed that. I mean, I'm sure that other people have too, but I don't want to call it peer pressure, but it is in a way. You recognize what the culture is, so you can push them along that education line just by that kind of messaging too, the actions that you're doing. You have digital messaging, email messaging, having a monthly challenge, maybe having a display that says some of the feedback on the numbers. Maybe you're talking to someone who's very analytical and likes numbers, so you share that whatever the amount of diversion, tonnage, or percentage, based on what you guys are no longer throwing in the trash and what you're putting in the recycling. I would share that. You would maybe reach somebody that way as well.
Yeah, you mentioned, like, whenever I'm in a meeting or I'm in a different location, that's one of the first things I notice if they don't have recycling. So it's kind of the norm to have recycling at this point. But yeah, like you said, there are challenges, and with your organization, it might be something where maybe you can't do it this year, but you're planning this year to do it next year, to implement a program next year. Always make sure you do the legwork first. Make sure that, you mentioned waste audits, and there's various levels, I would imagine, of waste audits that you can do, and that will give you something that you could measure. Otherwise, it's kind of a guessing game of whether or not your actions that you're taking are having a positive impact with that. We have with plastic bags, like the city's program here internally, not the residential program, but we don't do plastic bags. However, we do have somebody who will collect those plastic bags from a couple of our sections, and they'll take them to recycle them at, like, Kroger or I think Target, Walmart, Giant Eagle, they have those plastic bag containers that you could put your, but they have containers that you put your plastic bags in. But as you mentioned, one step better than that is maybe getting some canvas bags with your organization's name and logo on it and giving it to employees. Maybe that's a way to kind of roll out some of these things too. So it's like they're getting excited about it. I love your idea about sharing the data with them, because that helps them keep engaged, of knowing that their actions are making a difference. So absolutely. So with businesses, is there like a top, I don't know, top 5 or top 2 things that they should look out for when they are looking to do a recycling program, like things to avoid or make sure you do these couple things?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that I have learned um, is that there could be a huge breakdown in communication between your custodial staff and the office staff. So I hear conversations a lot of times about we're doing so well, and then I was here in the evening and I saw the custodial worker putting the trash and the recycling in one bin, and it wasn't making it to the correct, container out to be picked up. So I mean, that's very frustrating, because you've got all this stuff good happening inside, and then there's this breakdown in communication. So I would caution that that would be the biggest, weakest link, I guess, that you really have to make sure that the company that you contract with understands what your program is, what your expectations are, that the people that are coming into your building to do the work know where the stuff goes, maybe even has a connection or where to call for questions, so that you can keep a successful program going. And then, that if it's a contractor that you're working with, or if it's an internal employee, obviously if it's an internal employee, it's a lot easier to have those conversations. Whereas a contractor, I know there's a labor challenge right now, so maybe they have different people coming into your building. So that might mean that you have to put extra signage up where the custodial closet might be, that explains what the recycling program is, so that that they're clear, like have clear direction on where things go and what to do with them. That way your program stays sustainable.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I think a lot of people might not know, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the things that are recycled here in Franklin County actually stay within the Midwest. Like those materials, they get sorted, and then the commodity is sold, and it goes usually someplace in the Midwest, and it's made into something else. So it's all kind of regional. It's not going overseas. It's not going, to other countries, but it's actually staying kind of close to home. And even with aluminum, I think there was an aluminum shortage, I think, at some point. But with aluminum, I believe you could recycle that over and over and over, and it never loses its strength. And most of the aluminum out there is made out of recycled content.
Yeah, that's correct. And most people don't realize that Advanced Drainage Systems is in Hilliard, and it's like one of the largest buyers of plastic, to recycle plastic that gets made into pipe. And they're right here local, and they want more plastic. I mean, we need to be able to give that to them. We need to collect it from the stream, and that's why our focus is on the business community, because we know that 60% of the materials in the landfill are coming from the business community, and that we could do better at diversion for plastics and cans and paper and cardboard. But yes, and when the government in China in 2018 ended those outlets for where we were shipping stuff, that really only affected the coast, the East and the West Coast, because the Midwest already had markets. We already had buyers for the material, so we weren't as affected as other parts of the country where they were kind of scrambling for people to buy their materials.
And the one thing with this too, another thing, I keep saying the one thing, but the 15th thing about like the business recycling program too, is when you roll that out, it gives you an opportunity to also give employees ideas of how they could reduce their waste. So you had mentioned some of those things earlier. So it's not necessarily just recycling, because we always hear reduce, reuse, recycle, and we need to think about it in those terms. So when you're rolling out a recycling program for your employees, think about things you can do that you can let them know how to reduce. And I know at SWACO, I know on your social media, you all are constantly posting things of how people can reduce their waste, how they can reuse things. I know on our GreenSpot social media, we do the same. It's kind of looking at it a little bit holistically instead of just one component of it.
Yeah, and
So,
just taking baby steps, and deciding, what that means for you as an individual, that, that because you make up part of the whole at the company. So, maybe the one change, the one thing that you're going to do differently is to use cloth napkins instead of paper napkins in your lunch, or have that at your desk, and have silverware instead of plasticware. Like, if everyone does that one thing, that would, reduce the amount of paper napkins that are being purchased and then end up in the waste stream. I mean, that's just one idea. Or even just, the refillable water bottle versus the plastic.
absolutely. There's one company we worked with, and they had this great idea that they implemented, and it was basically mug shots. And so they got rid of all the styrofoam that they used, and they encouraged their employees to bring in mugs. And then they also provided some mugs as well. And a day out of the month, somebody would go around and take pictures of you with your mug and then post it on the intranet, right? And it was called your mug shot. And I thought it was kind of a clever way
Yeah.
to get rid of the styrofoam. And you will always have people who are going to be kind of laggards when it comes to recycling and who might not want to do it. Sometimes it's like, as long as you get like 90% or 95% acceptance rate, you're good. You might not be able to get everybody, and that's okay. But most people, I think, at this point in the game, understand the benefit of reduce, reuse, and recycle with our limited resources.
Yeah, I know another company that has trivia on Fridays at 2 o'clock, and it rotates from different people. And one Friday might be Harry Potter trivia, but then another Friday for America Recycles Week, which was this Friday, they are having a conversation about recycling. So there was all kinds of trivia questions about, the stats and maybe Franklin County. I mean, I provided them with a lot of information so they could make up their trivia questions. But there's creative ways to engage and to educate and to just meet those decision makers, wherever they are on the stage or the process of whether they're going to participate in your recycling program, or be a champion for your program, or at least not, if they're not wanting to participate, at least they're not going to contaminate or do harm to your program. Maybe they just they're just, I guess, neither here nor there. They're indifferent.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, if people have any questions, please write them in the chat in the WebEx. We'll give it another minute here, or if you're watching us on Facebook, you could write it in the comment section. One thing with recycling or any sustainability effort is really the continual education. Sheila had mentioned when you have staff turnover and a new person comes in, you don't want to lose that institutional knowledge that employee who left had. So institutionalizing it, having documents of how the program started, what are the best management practices for your organization, how often you need to do those refresher courses, all things to put in writing so you don't forget about them, or if the person moves out. So absolutely.
Yeah,
Cool. Well,
that was
I
going
was
to say
just say,
that's
Sheila,
that
last
was
words.
the
Do you have any
yeah. I'm
words of
sorry.
wisdom?
I was just
Any last last words of wisdom?
I was going to say that's what the whole purpose of the toolkit was, to be able to capture the data, have a place for it. So if there is turnover, whoever's, taking over your recycling program will have all this information that's wonderfully there collected to restart the program or improve it. The toolkit's really the nice free downloadable template that will help you do that.
That's great. And that's something, folks, that really take advantage of that. SWACO spent a lot of time and effort putting that together, and it's an excellent resource to use. If you have any questions, Sheila had her email address up there for a while, so you can email her directly. You can also email me at greenspot@columbus.gov if you have any questions. But seeing no questions, so I think we answered all of them. I want to thank Sheila, and I thank everybody for tuning in. And enjoy next week for the holiday, and keep recycling, and keep reducing, reusing, and recycling.
Thank you.